Hello everyone, this is Mponengweli, and this is the Pain, Suffering and Happiness podcast. This podcast will help you to live fully. Pain and suffering form the beauty of life. Embrace the pain. Keep pushing one day at a time. Yesterday is history and tomorrow is mystery. All you have is now. In today's podcast, I'll be talking about an interesting topic about African spirituality, religion, and suffering. The purpose of the podcast is not to bash religion or to speak bad about any religious beliefs, but to share a different perspective and to help inspire people to think differently and to be multidimensional, to help people to always search for the truth and not rely on other people in terms of getting the truth. I'll also discuss about how African stories and myth have been plagiarized to form religious texts. The episode will also focus on spirituality versus religion and suffering, and also look at the harm that religion has caused us. I will also share some light in terms of my thinking on the context of God in African spirituality. I will start by talking about religion, and before I go deeper, I'll look at the etymology of the word religion. The word religion comes from the word religio, which is a Latin word, and it means to bind or to create a bond. It also comes from the word religare, which is also Latin, meaning to tie fast. I would also want to point out to the fact that in the word religion, we also find the word legion, which simply refers to a vast number of people. A legion can be defined as a form of a club, some man-made group of people, and in this particular instance, focusing on a belief on some supernatural power. And then the word legion also refers to paying allegiance to, or being a member of and living a life in terms of the prescripts of a particular group of people, or a legion, or a club, or in the form of a religion. And here, people pay allegiance to a belief system, and this is primarily focused on some of a deity or a god. After God, who is considered the hero, we have to have some form of an opponent to God. The whole issue of religion will not really be of any significance if there is no God and there is no opponent to the God. And then God is therefore the hero, and then the opponent is the bad. So for religion is based on division, the good and the bad, the positive and the negative. So that is the polarity. And obviously from there, then we find the foundation of religion, which is basically divide and rule. It starts basically from there. Thus, we also find in the world a variety of religions that are contradictory to each other, creating more confusion, more wars, and breeding more ignorance. So it is important to note that for religion to be there, we need a God and we need a devil. And as we know, in Christianity, they talk of the devil as one of God's angels who was created by God himself, and he went bad, meaning that he started to defy God, and then he was thrown to earth to cause a lot of torment. And thus he is attributed to all the bad that is happening to human life, and that includes wars, diseases, your sinning by people, poverty, inequality. This is all attributed to the devil. So therefore, there is a need for an opponent to God. Otherwise, if there is no opponent, God is the only one in charge, then the issue of having a hero becomes immaterial. The other aspect of religion is that there must be some form of a book, and the followers of the religion will always point out that the book comes from the God. And the other aspect of the religion is the messenger of God. Instead of God fighting the devil, who was one of his own creation, he rather sent one of his messengers to fight the devil. And you'll ask a lot of questions on why he chooses that, and I don't think there's anybody to explain that. And the messenger is the representative of God, and he is the hero. And in this case, we find messengers such as your Moses in Judaism, Jesus in Christianity, Muhammad in Islam. It's also important to note that all religions have a birth date, meaning that at some point in time they did not exist. And then you can ask yourself a question also, that all this time when there was no religion, was it because God had forgotten that men needed a religion in order to thrive on earth, in order to deal with the evilness of the devil? What was happening when some of these religions that people talk so fondly of didn't exist? At the same time also, these followers of these religions point out that if you don't believe and submit, you are going to go to hell. So the question you ask is, what about our ancestors who lived before these religions were introduced or known? What happens to them? Do they go to hell or not? Or they are spared because the religion was not yet introduced to the masses by then? What is the formula to go to heaven in that particular instance? I would like to point out that Islam is 1,400 years old, approximately. Christianity, approximately 2,000 years old, meaning that Islam is younger than Christianity. But Judaism, which is more than 6,000 years old, is far older than Christianity. And I think it makes sense that the majority of more than 70% of people in the Holy Land in Israel do not believe in Christianity. They rather believe in Judaism. And it makes sense. I mean, why must they believe in something that came 4,000 years later, after their religion was more than 2,000 years old. So you can't blame them. For them, what matters is Judaism and the law of Moses. And it makes a lot of sense. Then there are also other religions that are far older than the monotheistic religions that I've just spoken about, in the form of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, where there's a belief in one God. There are other religions where there were beliefs in more than one God. And these include your Hinduism, it's far older, and other beliefs that were found in places such as Egypt and Persia. Buddhism is also known to be far older than Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. Before I go further, I would want to articulate a bit on the foundations of religion, as pointed by a professor, an American professor called Tim Lidon. And he wrote a book where he articulates a lot on the issue of Zoroaster as the founder of religion. He points out that Zoroaster discovered the devil and also paradise. And this was long before the existence of Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Zoroaster also discovered the whole issue of the Last Judgment. So these issues that are raised in your Islam, Judaism, or your Christianity were there. They were stuff that was spoken about ages before the existence of these religions. Zoroaster also spoke about the issue of resurrection of the dead. And it is also important to note that a religion called Mithraism is an offshoot of Zoroaster. So, after what I've said, it is very clear to point out that most of these religious texts are plagiarized from old stories and myth that existed in places such as Persia, which is the present-day Iran. But in particular, if one was to zoom a little bit, not too much deeply, into Christianity, one will find far more plagiarism or a lot of theft of ideas that has been used in putting together the book or the holy book defined as the Bible in this present day. And much of it comes from our continent in Africa, although people don't want to admit that, because obviously they don't want to admit that Africa has been ahead in many ways or in many areas of knowledge, in philosophy, in medicine, in language, in writing, and all sorts of things. I would like to point out in particular to Horus, the Egyptian god, and he was referred to as the way, the truth, and the life. And I think before I can even say more, you know exactly that this has been used to refer to Jesus Christ in the Bible. Horus was also baptized by Anub, and Jesus, by water. And Jesus was baptized by John by water. And thus Anub is called the Baptist. It's called Anub the Baptist. And John is also referred to as John the Baptist. Horus is referred to have been born in Anu, which is the place of bread. And at the same time, Jesus is also referred to have been born in Bethlehem, the house of bread. There's also a story of Horus with the 7 men on a boat. And at the same time, we also hear of Jesus Christ with 7 men on a boat in that particular verse that is very famous, talking about the storm that troubled them in the night. We also hear about Horus being referred to as the lamb, and at the same time we know Jesus is also referred to as the lamb. Going further again on the story of Horus and its similarity with the story of Jesus in the Bible, I would want to note that Horus was identified with the third cross, whilst Jesus is also identified with the cross. We also hear about Horus of 12 years, and at the same time in the Bible we hear about Jesus at the age of 12 years engaging with elders, even in temples. We hear of Horus being baptized at the age of 30, and we hear of Jesus also being baptized at the age of 30. Similarly, we hear of Horus being referred to as the Christ, and we also know Jesus is also referred to as Jesus Christ. Also, the other plagiarism is the issue of the Trinity of Atum, the Father, Horus, the Son, and Ra, the Holy Spirit. And at the same time in the Bible we hear of the Trinity of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The other thing also that is important to know is the issue of Horus as the child of the Virgin, and also as the son of Ra. And Jesus also is referred to as a child of a virgin and a son of the Father. I go further to point out that Set and Horus have some fight on the mount, and at the same time we hear of the story of Jesus and Satan contending on the mount. Similarly, the star announces the birth of the child Horus, and at the same time the star from the east indicated the birth of Jesus. Horus is referred as somebody who comes with peace, and at the same time Jesus is referred to as the bringer of peace. Horus is also referred to as the child teacher in the temple, and at the same time Jesus is also referred to as the child teacher in the temple. We hear of the 12 followers of Horus, and at the same time we also hear of the 12 disciples that spent a significant time with Jesus until his crucifixion. We hear about the revelation written down by Anne, the scribe of the divine words, and also we hear of the revelations by John the Divine. At the same time, there's also other similarities, and we must remember the story of Horus far predates the story of Jesus Christ. And in particular, I would want to point out that it is noted that Horus walked on water. Similarly, Horus performed miracles. Horus was executed besides 2 thieves, was resurrected, and he went to heaven. It is also pointed out that the saluter bears witness to the word of Ra and the testimony of Horus. At the same time, we hear of John, who bears witness of the word of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ. We hear of the name on the head of the deceased, the name of Ra, and then at the same time we hear about the name of the Father on the forehead. It is without doubt that the Holy Book has been heavily plagiarized from Egyptian stories and mythology. And it's not even a very far removed type of plagiarism. It's really plagiarism of its worst kind. Almost word for word. So I want to zoom into the issue of the miraculous foundations of religions. One of the things that is used to really drum up the validity of a religion or any religious leader in this, even up to this present day, is the issue of miracles. People love miracles. The love of miracles is very intense to the point of addiction, and it has really caused a significant amount of suffering. One of the things that has been noted is the issue of, these special messengers of God being born of virgins. I would like to point out that the whole issue of people being born of virgins is not really new, even to religions such as Christianity. Stories of people born of virgins predate Christianity by thousands of years. I'll point out that Krishna, the Hindu god, is also noted to have been born of a virgin called Divanka. At the same time, Horus, that I've spoken quite a lot as an African, and being an African myself, was born of the virgin Isis. At the same time, Mithras is also, the story of Mithras from Persia, which is present-day Iran, like I've already pointed, was born of a virgin, and Mithras was also referred in particular as the way, the truth, and the light. And he was born centuries before Christ. Mithras was also put in a tomb, and he was released after 3 days amidst huge celebrations. And I know you know the whole story of Jesus and the resurrection, and the 3 days ties up with the story of Mithras too. Mithras was also noted to have been born in the presence of a few shepherds, similar to the story of Jesus Christ. Mithras was also called the Son of God, and he was also called the Good Lamb. His followers believed in the day of judgment and going to heaven. Paul, who never knew Jesus, took all mythological themes and attached them to Jesus, creating a Jesus Christ mythology. Mithras holidays such as Christmas, Easter, the resurrection festivals have been adopted by Christians. I would want also to point at what are the benefits of religion. And one will be, it's a very good political tool. The fact that religion mobilizes people, create groupings, it's good for the purposes of politics. Belonging to a form of a club or a group makes it easier to disseminate information and to indoctrinate and to control. Religion also offers a lot of emotional benefits and physical support from fellow congregants, counseling by the preachers. It also offers some good social capital in the form of safety net. You know, if you're hungry, some of your fellow church people can bring you food, or they can offer you some form of financial support. It is also the opium of the people, like Karl Marx said. We are all told on a day-to-day by these religious leaders that we are called to a life of happiness and prosperity, not to suffer. And that is a lie, but I think it's a good lie because it helps us to carry on in this difficult life and to be able to survive one day at a time. Also, the allure of heaven that we are always promised in religions is very significant in making us to progress in life, because the holding on to something good that is still coming can help us overcome immense suffering that we endure in this capitalist world. I would also want to touch on the issue of religion and suffering. It is very important to point out that religion has not brought any wealth to the masses, in particular in Southern Africa, where I reside. A significant amount of people in the churches remain poor. And it is also important to point out that it is based on controlling people by fear, and people are crippled by the whole concept of hell. The issue of being reminded by the religious leaders about the enemy that is pursuing us in our lives bring a lot of misery and lend us to all sorts of control and abuse. So thus religion remains divisive in most of the families, and it destroys them. I have noted and seen people practicing the same religion who do not like each other at all. There's just so much hatred. And even people in the same religion, reading the same Bible, they hate the other denominations so badly. And they believe others are not practicing what is in the Bible. And this is based on the messages that they get when they go to their own congregations and the leaders that they listen to who manipulate them to ensure that they remain part of their own congregations for divide and rule, divide and conquer. Religion poisons relations. It creates cults, separates people from their own families, to the point that sometimes there's so much suspicion and hatred and people don't even bury each other. Religion has also amplified the issue of witchcraft, making people to run to the churches. I believe it has caused so much harm than good in the form of wars. The creation of the false hope of a good life in heaven is very comforting, but it doesn't bring permanent relief from pain and suffering that people endure in a capitalist system that is controlled by greed and politicians. It's very comforting to the layabouts or the people who don't want to do much that they have found a place they can spend time and say they are busy praying without doing much work for the betterment of their own lives and humanity at large. I've also learned that religion is promoting a class-based system where when you go to a church, they look at the clothes you dress, the education that you have, the car and the house that you have, and they afford you a particular status. It has led to a lot of extremism, people sleeping in dangerous places in mountains in search of miracles. In some cases, I've heard of people who go to holy places and when they return, they don't even wash their cars for months because they don't want to wash away the lack. They don't even wash their clothes for months because they don't want to wash away the lack. Some people go to the extent of not taking medication for chronic diseases. So religion really has brought serious and terrible tendencies that a professor called Phil Zuckerman, who is a professor of sociology, points out a few of them. And one of those is that religion has created people that are deeply racist. You hear of people in some examples who go on to work in countries such as Saudi Arabia, and in particular if they are coming from places such as Africa, they are really treated as subhuman and considered to be lesser than the creation of God. Obviously, it also leads to the promotion of slavery, and it goes without saying that these religious texts even have verses that describe on how to practice slavery. And as much as slavery has been banned in this current day, the reading of these particular scriptures has created a particular ego in particular races where they feel that they are superior and they are pushing agendas of subjugating other races in the world, controlling other races, imposing their own religion. And this is all driven at a very low and subconscious level by scripture that is considered to be holy and from God. Religions also tend to create people who are highly sexist and in particular oppressing women. It goes without saying in most of the churches or be other in religions such as Islam, women are treated to be at the lower end of the ladder. Religion also creates people who are highly homophobic, very intolerant of homosexuals. Zuckerman, the professor of sociology, goes on to point out that most religious people, either Muslim or Christian, support the death penalty. The other things also is that they also tend to be more supportive to gun ownership, and which is very ironic because you would suspect that religious people believe in God, so they don't need any form of protection from things such as guns. And I believe wars such as those in Israel, the September 11 attack in the US by Bin Laden and his people, were fueled by religion. And in the case of Bin Laden, somebody was quite very highly educated, but religion reduced him into someone who felt that killing other people was the best thing to do for his own God. It has been noted that religions, for example, Christianity, have not become major religions by a quality of the truth, but by the quality of the violence. And this has been noted by Professor Michael Sherlock. Religion thrives on indoctrination and fear. Also, adopting of pagan practices and holidays, which are then assumed now to be holy. One of the things that I would want to touch on is the commercialization of the church, which is really a big deal, in particular in Southern Africa, where the religion is growing by leaps and bounds. Churches are seen as markets to sell products, and the religious leaders, they know the power that they have because of the market that they have, which commercial enterprises want to access. And they are implementing a purely capitalist system where 1% of the people get rich. And in this particular, the 1% who enjoy the benefits of the church is the priest or the bishop or whoever it is, his family and his cronies. And those are the people that don't amount to 1% of the whole church or congregation in large. So what happens in these churches in terms of the commercial value thereof is the selling of a variety of things, and that includes insurances, oils, water, stickers, t-shirts, uniforms, and all sorts of paraphernalia that you can mention. And people in most cases are forced to believe that these things are going to contribute to their own healing and protect them against witchcraft and bad luck. And this will bring them good luck in terms of jobs, success in business. So they are forced to acquire these things. The sad thing that I've also learned, even from my mother, who goes to a new charismatic church, is the situation where pensioners are also being forced to tithe on their social grants in an activity that is referred to in these charismatic churches as sowing the seed. I don't know what an old person of 80 years, benefits from sowing the seed when they're in their twilight years of their lives. And I believe this is complete abuse. I would also want to touch on issue of African pride as a way of bringing us in Southern Africa into valuing ourselves and our ancestors and the rich heritage and greatness and noble life that they've handed us. And a lot of things that we have found which should make us intensively proud. These include the art of writing, which originated here in Africa and Egypt. The first plant-based paper, which was produced here in Africa and Egypt. Our rich history from one country to another, from one tribe to another, is testimony of how noble we are and how great we are. The political systems that our ancestors set up, governance systems of running villages, building, a lot of systems over the years without being able to read and write, shows that our ancestors were smart beyond imagination. They have bequeathed us a very rich heritage. It doesn't matter where you sit in the African continent. There is a rich heritage that you can tap into, and you can find a lot of wealth. You can commercialize and make a living out of it. They have left us languages that are rich with proverbs, idioms. Universities were also started in Africa. We have universities that were there ages ago when people said Africa was one of the dark continents, universities in Mali and other places. Music and dance is one of the things that we inherit, which is very rich and untapped. Architecture of the highest level, the cities built like Great Zimbabwe, the pyramids in Egypt, and a whole lot of other places. The knowledge on indigenous medicine that is used for, healing, not treating symptoms, like the drugs that were being sold and being given to cripple ourselves, that would depend on a capitalist system that is full of greed. There is so much wealth that we have that can make us not to be fooled by the religious charlatans and to be misled by the religious charlatans. I'm still going to touch on the issue of spirituality in relation to the whole issue of African pride and heritage, history and culture. I would want to touch on the issue of God in an African context. God in an African context is not individualized. And by that I mean that God doesn't deal with me as a person, but rather deals with a collective. That is, God deals with a family, a community, a country, a continent, but not individual matters. And it's also known in my culture that God doesn't deal with petty problems, such as having a headache, some form of a sickness that can be addressed through herbal remedies, through healers that are available. These are things that can be dealt with without the intervention of God. And God is only approached when all avenues have been exhausted. God is approached as a collective. For example, God is approached when there is a member of a family suffering from an incurable disease or a pandemic that is killing people in a community, or a war that is destabilizing a country, a community, or drought that is killing animals and people and famine. Thus, God is said to be dealing with issues of significance. So you don't just sit and talk to God by yourself directly without engaging as a collective, because God is dealing with issues of significance. He is not going to be listening to you complaining about a headache and being tired from work, whatever things that can be handled by us as human beings. We have been given the resources, the expertise to deal with them. One of the things that I would want to talk about is African spirituality. And I'll start by the etymology of the word spirit, which also originates from the Latin word spiritus, which simply means to breathe. And if you look at the issue of the definition of the word religion, which means to bind or to tie, and the issue of spirituality or spirit, which simply means to breathe, you'll realize that being spiritual is more liberating. It doesn't bind you, it liberates you. It enables you to breathe and to thrive. I would want to mention that as Africans, we are spiritual beings. We are not religious. And we do not pray to ancestors. Whoever says that Africans pray to ancestors is very ignorant, because in my knowledge, even in my language, when we have an ancestral function where we meet as a family, that function is not, the word is not called to pray in my language, which simply means upasa, or to commune with the spirit, with the ancestors, meaning to remember those who made us who we are. As we know, a tree is never better than its roots. So Africans have never worshipped any ancestors. And the word tabero or tabelo in Sotho, which means to pray, is not the same word that is used when people gather, upasa, to commune with the spirit. It's not the same. So we have never prayed ancestors, and that discussion must never be mentioned. And whoever talks about ancestor worship in reference to Africans is telling a lie that we must not even accept. And that person is obviously being very ignorant and has not really gone to consult with elders and understand the words and how things are done and the processes that are used when people commune with those who have passed away. And also, if people blame Africans for praying to ancestors, then what are the people of these other religions doing? Because all the people who are in the books read by Jews for their religion, which is Judaism, or Christians, these are people who have passed away, and they are ancestors. Anyone who has passed away who doesn't exist in a physical form is an ancestor. It's as simple as that. It's period. So we must probably even just maybe accept that everybody is doing some form of ancestor worship. It's just that others think they are clever and they can be able to throw mud on others and label them badly, whilst they elevate themselves into some form of a holy ground, which is a pure lie, and it's a form of deceit and a way to control people and to make Africans feel ashamed of themselves, so that they must be proud of, paying to revere Jewish ancestry as their own. Whilst we read very well in the Bible, Jews are very uncompromising, that they say in their Bible, this is the God of Israel. It's not your God. So it's not yours. So they are very much open about their affairs. They are not hiding. They tell us in the face. It's just that we don't want to listen. And we are being used by charlatans who happen to have grabbed particular verses in these scriptures, which they use to control. And they don't read you the scriptures where, for example, the Bible will say the world will come to an end, it will burn. But there's also a verse that says the earth will continue in perpetuity, without an end. They will not read you the one that says it will not come to an end, because you will not be controllable, and you are not going to be fearful, and you are of no benefit to them and their mission of using you and your hand and resources for their own benefit, whilst they promise you of a better life elsewhere. And it's very ironic that the people who are promising you a better life are having a blast of a life, or the best of life, in front of you, in your eyes, but they are very much unashamed to tell you that for you to have a good one, it will be somewhere else. So therefore, it simply means they are also going to have a double portion. They are having a good life here in front of us, and they're going to have another good life somewhere in heaven, which they know where it is, where we don't know, you know. So in African spirituality, the belief is that God is in you. God talks to you. You know, God is your spirit. And we also believe that we are all equal. There is no such thing as a man of God or a woman of God, that we find now people have created their own demigods, the people that they have elevated to some form of a God that they praise, they worship, they associate with immortality, they associate with no pain and no suffering. And these people have managed to live a life of camouflaging their own pain and suffering to allude others, to, to mislead other people into believing that, there is that possibility of not having a pain and suffering free life on this earth, which is a lie. This life is intertwined with both pain, suffering, and happiness. It's a package. Those things, they make life complete. In terms of African spirituality, we also believe that some people are more spiritually gifted than others. And that can be found in the form of healers. Those who can be able to tell what will happen tomorrow. Those who can be able to tell, what is happening in your life and what challenges are you encountering and how can you navigate them. And we also believe that healers get the healing power free. And in the past, actually, healers used to treat people for free, and they will just tell you to come back and thank them after you have been healed. It is never seen as a commercial thing that you sell and amass wealth, as we are seeing in this modern day, where people are more addicted to money and all the good thing that goes with it. And also we believe in herbal remedies, which are now, after people from the West have sold us drugs for centuries, for decades, and now they've realized that the drugs are very harmful to both ourselves and themselves. Now they've established big companies such as Herbalife. They're coming back to sell us herbs. And in our churches, these companies such as Herbalife are welcomed to sell as much as they want, because they come in nicely packaged, plastic and containers. And whilst an African with his herbs in whatever form of bottles will never be allowed to come close to a church and sell his or her own herbal remedies. And it tells how brainwashed we are and how mentally skewed we have become, to the point of harming ourselves. It is such a sad situation to witness. The concept of African spirituality is aimed at fostering unity. That's why there's always this annual family gathering called Upasa. It's basically to bring the family together so that we can see each other, know each other, avoid situations where we'll end up marrying each other, or we even pass each other without knowing each other as a family. So The whole issue of African spirituality is to promote the collective. Always is an issue of the collective. You approach God as a collective. You celebrate success as a family. You gather together as a family. So it is basically the collective that should benefit, that should enjoy. And the enjoyment is here on this particular earth. Our own intention is to ensure that people can do and live a prosperous life here, not somewhere else where we don't know. Lastly, I would want to point out that as human beings, let us do our best to conquer the world through intelligence. Let us strive for knowledge, kindliness, and courage to confront this life full of pain and suffering. And let us also, in particular, as Africans, use our education to understand ourselves better. By that I mean, let us be humble enough to sit with old people who may not even be illiterate, and engage them to understand their way they used to live and the knowledge that has been passed on to them, so that we can capture that in writing to lay a foundation of what we can share with our children and our grandchildren. The whole idea of just floating and living without understanding ourselves and just allowing people to talk bad about our people, our ancestors, to heal us in our communities, who then get ostracized and in some cases ridiculed, killed, because they are just practicing that which has been passed on from one generation to another, which they know to work. But we have been indoctrinated with new beliefs from countries that do not even believe in these things anymore. So let us not be subdued by fear, which is being used by charlatans and noble people that come out very well dressed and very fluent, with very good oratory skills, with very slick intentions to benefit from the hard-earned money and efforts of people who are really doing their best to survive in a brutal capitalist system. And let us look at suffering in the eye and confront it and tell ourselves that we have to do our best in this life that we have, not in the one that we don't know where it will happen. Let us strive to have the best of a good life here and not anywhere else. Let us also strive to stop the indoctrination and allow our children to grow without being indoctrinated in some way, so that they can be free-minded and free-spirited, and they must be allowed to question literally anything. We must strive to be proud Africans. Our knowledge has been usurped and is being used to dominate us through religions. And if we read, we will be able to realize that the information has been stolen from us and is being turned against us. It is important to note that in this life we have to suffer in order to appreciate happiness. It's sadly the truth that we need to accept. It's a duality of life. Suffering and happiness go hand in hand. Also, we must strive to find alternatives to help us cope with life. And this can include meditation and yoga. They may offer more benefits than religious indoctrinations, where people just get brainwashed, and to the point where you can take all your hard-earned resources and give them to one individual and his family, only to have a blast of a life here in front of you, and even come to brag to you about the quality of the clothes you wear, the holidays he takes, and the best schools, the way he takes his children, and the good life that they enjoy through your hard-earned cash and work. It is important to point out once and for all that African spirituality is by far superior. I would want to reiterate it again. African spirituality is by far more superior than any form of religious indoctrination. No one must come and lie to you and say religion is better than African spirituality. That is a big lie. Religion takes us back to kindergarten. If somebody tells you you are better off with a religion, with the belief that you need to go to heaven or to access heaven through somebody else, then there's a serious problem. Africans arrived at the concept of spirituality because they realized its uniting power. They didn't want anything that divides, anything that elevates another man above another one, anything that creates this impression that some men have to control others. We settled for spirituality because it is the superior form of intellect, of human success, of education. There's nothing above it. Anything else is the same as a university graduate being told that you were better off as a primary school child. And how ridiculous can that be? Religion simply takes us into people that need to think and behave like primary school children. Just take it as it is, as you are told. Don't question it. And these people who are the demigods, who are the charlatans, who have mastered the art of speaking, the oratory skills, are having the best time here in front of us. And they make sure they don't read us those scriptures that will empower us, that will enable us to question things, that will tell us that the world is not coming to an end at any point. We are going to die and other people are going to be born, and it's going to continue like that. They are not going to read you anything that will empower you to the point where you will become a problem or a nuisance to them. You will become uncontrollable. You will not be able to give away your hard-earned resources freely. It's a game of control, divide and rule. Lastly, I want to point out that the quest for miracles in us Africans needs to come to an end. We need to realize once and for all that being alive is the best form of miracle ever to happen to us. The ability to talk, to walk, to read, to write is a miracle in itself, enough to live for. There's no need to go and look for any other form of miracle that anybody will ever promise us. We are the miracle, and we don't have to look anywhere further. In closing, this is the Pain, Suffering and Happiness podcast. This podcast will help you to live fully. Pain and suffering form the beauty of life. Embrace the pain. Keep pushing one day at a time. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. All you have is now.